What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review James Gunn's latest movie, The Suicide Squad, a movie that is easily the best goddamn new movie I've seen all year. The movie is now available on HBO Max as well as in theaters, so I will eventually be getting into some spoilers, but initially, I'll try and keep my rave review light on details, just in case you're debating whether or not to pull the trigger and watch it. My advice is that you should. In a genre that I increasingly find to be stale, family-friendly, and nauseatingly corporate, James Gunn has managed to make me a believer again, delivering a kick-ass R-rated superhero experience that I rank right up there alongside Deadpool, Logan, Kick-Ass, and Kingsman: The Secret Service. If James Gunn never goes back to Disney, I'll be totally fine with that as long as Warner Brothers continues to stay out of his way and let him tell his stories in his own unique signature style. Admittedly, his style is not for everyone. I'm biased as hell. I love his more extreme content, things like Slither, Super, and PG porn, but this might be my favorite thing that he's ever done, almost like he was taking requests from his fans. And I've been fired up to see this movie ever since it was first announced, but the movie wildly exceeded my expectations. And at a time where I've seen so many franchises I love get damaged by lackluster filmmakers, it's hard to put into words what a relief it is and how exhilarating it is to see a filmmaker take a legacy franchise that's been around for a very long time and make it even better. I've loved DC my entire life, but let's face it, their movies and their shows are like a roller coaster of good and bad. And I'll need to watch the movie a few more times to be sure, but this might be my favorite live-action DC movie of the last decade. Aging grumpy film lovers like myself are constantly bitching about how much movies suck these days, and more often than not, they do, but when a movie delivers, man, it gives me such a rush of adrenaline. I honestly lost track of all the times where I felt just waves of chills going down my arms and neck, watching one great scene after another. Now, before I get too carried away, I should try and offer one criticism just for the sake of having some credibility. But the only thing I can say on the front is that perhaps the soundtrack is less iconic than in James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I still enjoyed the tunes, but I ran that first Guardians soundtrack into the ground when it came out listening to it on repeat. Otherwise, though, I really have no complaints. And I'm going to deliberately try and keep this review brief so that I can get totally blazed and watch the movie all over again without having to take notes. But now it's time to explain why I enjoyed this movie so much, which means spoilers, so if you don't want spoilers, go watch the flick. Okay. So my notes are completely chaotic, and I'm thinking the easiest thing to do is just to go through this thing chronologically. First up, I watched it on HBO Max, and it only crashed once, which is really good for that platform. Plus, I didn't have to sit next to hundreds of people on their telephones, which is par for the course in New York, and I didn't have to sit through 30 minutes of trailers. I think we can all agree that trailers before movies these days, they're absolutely pointless in the age of the internet. In the pre-internet days, hell yes, I loved watching trailers before movies, but now they just waste our time. But next up, I always love seeing James Gunn reassemble folks from his stock company of actors, people like Sean Gunn, Michael Rooker, Nathan Fillion, and of course James Gunn's old boss, Lloyd Kaufman, in another great cameo. But let's get right into the first few scenes where we see Task Force X get absolutely decimated due to the betrayal of Blackguard. And it took me right back to the late 80s when John Ostrander was writing his signature run on the title, and that first battle scene was totally hysterical, especially as we watched the staff at headquarters making bets on who's going to live or die. And right away we see that this movie is going to be leaning all the way in on the gore, decapitations, dismemberments, oftentimes in amazingly creative ways, which I look forward to savoring the second time that I watch it. And the body count in this movie, it was truly humbling, and deservedly so. This is a Suicide Squad movie, and only a handful of our central characters make it to the closing credits. In any event, I love the twist of having two teams arriving on different beaches, forcing Bloodsport into a leadership role as they try and salvage the mission, rescue Flag and Harley, and get to the bottom of Operation Starfish. One crucial ingredient to this movie's success is how James Gunn lets the bad guys be bad guys. So many of these characters are willing to kill or sacrifice or just eat children, whether you're talking about Weasel on one end of the spectrum or Amanda Waller on the other, who has the best I don't give a fuck expression I've seen in quite some time. And then you have characters like Peacemaker, who has signature lines like, "I cherish peace with all my heart. I don't care how many men, women, and children I have to kill to get it." John Cena, he was just incredible from start to finish, but what I did not anticipate was how some of his scenes toward the end would get legitimately hardcore with no comedy whatsoever. He's really loyal to Waller and her mission, and he's happy to kill anyone for the sake of the mission, including Colonel Rick Flag. I could not believe what happened in their face-off. First we get that great battle scene reflected in Peacemaker's helmet, and then we see Peacemaker quite literally stabbing him right in his heart. And I was terrified that John Cena was going to kill my new favorite member of the team, Ratcatcher 2, but luckily, Bloodsport was there to help save the day in this kick-ass standoff where he shoots right through Peacemaker's bullet, Also, spoiler alert, there's a scene with Peacemaker after the closing credits, which obviously tees up this new TV show that's coming our way. So I'm incredibly fired up to see him in action again in his new show, and I think he and Waller absolutely make the perfect team. But speaking of Bloodsport, Idris Elba, he just nailed it. He's a total badass from start to finish, and watching him use his endless supply of gadgets and weapons is one of the best visual treats of the movie. Early on, he and Peacemaker have this incredible scene where they're attacking a camp of soldiers, killing them one at a time in creative ways with no sound at all, and it's a strong contender for my favorite action scene I've seen all year. And what makes it even better is that they're actually killing freedom fighters who in theory should be on their side, but they don't find that out until after the fact. And as great as the action might be, the jokes just had me howling, whether John Cena was claiming that calling attention to his tighty-whities was racist, or King Shark trying to eat everything in sight, including Ratcatcher 2 as she sleeps, or the debate over how long Milton might have been running alongside them before he was finally killed, or Polka Dot Man seeing every living thing as yet another version of his mother, whether it's a room full of people dancing in a club, or Starro the Conqueror. And as always, Harley Quinn, she brings the comedy. I love how she says, "You are so freaking hot," before boning this corrupt politician, and their courtship scene when they're staring at each other with birds on their head. I mean, I was just screaming out loud, probably bugging the hell out of my neighbors. But even better was when she declares R.I.P. to the absolutely beautiful monster between your legs after she blows him away. So we might as well talk about Harley Quinn while we're on the subject. The character finally has a writer who can deliver scenes that the character deserves. I hope Margot Robbie and James Gunn will stay connected at the hip on future flicks, and I know fans are already obsessed with her. At this point, she is a pop culture icon, but in my opinion, her material in her last 2 live-action movies has been unworthy of her. So I imagine now her diehard fans, they're going to be doing cartwheels for months after seeing this movie. My favorite bit might be when she's playing possum during this torture sequence where she's hanging from the ceiling and she suddenly looks up in this really bone-chilling way right before taking out the dude with this triangle choke. It was like grace and death all in one, and I just loved it. But something that consistently caught me off guard was how many heartfelt moments there would be. Ordinarily, I just roll my eyes when movies get sentimental, but this movie, it earns those beats big time. Watching the team bonding over drinks in a club while looking for the Thinker was one of many of those scenes. And another great beat was watching this killer lineup of characters in slow motion, marching into battle in Jotunheim, all while the rain pours down on them. It was absolutely beautiful. And we get a similar beat watching them disobey Waller as they march off to kill Starro. And then once we get to the lab where Starro the Conqueror is being kept, my jaw just hit the floor, seeing how dark James Gunn was willing to go. Really embracing the freedom of that R rating, showing how the hosts for Starro, how they remain animated even when like they're missing limbs or missing their face. They're basically dead beneath those creatures that are an extension of Starro the Conqueror, and it was so creepy and cool watching how he could talk through each and every single one of them. And I think we needed that dark scene to avoid seeing Starro become totally ridiculous. Maybe some people will still find him ridiculous, but he's a childhood favorite of mine, and I loved how he is depicted in this movie, whether he was dismembering the Thinker and ripping apart right in front of that big-ass eye, or stomping on Polka Dot after losing a leg to his incredible powers. Starro's death scene was just epic as Ratcatcher 2 calls in this horde of cute little buggers who swarm all over him, and then eventually into him as Harley opens up a passageway with her new favorite weapon. And since I mentioned Ratcatcher 2, let's talk about Daniela Melchior. I hope I'm saying that correctly, but she's an actress from Portugal who I anticipate is just going to explode in popularity after this movie. For me, she kind of stole the show in one great scene after another, even if she was just sleeping away, totally oblivious to the danger around her. The most powerful moment in all movie for me is when she confronts Peacemaker over why he has to kill her, and he simply replies, "Because I'm thorough." That shit was just cold as ice. But thankfully, she did not meet her maker, giving her the chance to declare that the city belongs to her rats right before she swarms Starro with her little friends. Also, casting Taika Waititi as her dad was a masterstroke, and I hope that he and James Gunn will find more excuses to work together for the rest of their careers. Honestly, there's just so much to love about this movie. It's been a long time since I saw a big budget movie that made superheroes feel cool, and these characters are just cool as hell. I really need to see the surviving characters again, especially the legendary Sly Stallone, who was fucking amazing as King Shark, especially once he gets attacked by his new little friends who are kind of sucking and biting all over him, which basically sends him into this killing frenzy. And better still, the movie is not for little kids, and thank God. When the Suicide Squad is rushing the Thinker out the back of a club, we see boobs. When was the last time we saw boobs in a Marvel movie? Also, as I was watching it, I felt this old familiar feeling that I had not felt in a very long time. I did not want the movie to end. And that is an incredibly rare feeling for me, and so I applaud everyone involved in this movie. The word for how I feel about this movie is satisfied. And I just hope everyone out there enjoyed the flick as much as I did. I want this movie to be a massive hit so that Warner Brothers will continue to greenlight these kinds of projects and assign them to the filmmakers who can help these projects reach their full potential. But I think I've made my point. It's time to sign off. Let me know what you thought in the comments below, or just give me a shout on Twitter at Geeking Out. And if you liked the video, please give the channel a subscribe. But I hope everyone has an amazing weekend, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.